Exclusive. The real story of how an internet issue in Nepal turned into violent regime change is shocking. But it's a story you need to know to understand what's really happening in the world. In 2023, strategists in Washington, D.C. spotted a worrying problem in Asia. A small nation, Nepal, wanted internet independence, like China had. Now, you may know that the US used to sneer at what they called China's Great Firewall, seeing it as a press freedom issue. But no, that was a mistake. They realized they'd made a huge error. China having its own internet meant that the country could develop its own entire web ecosystem for commerce and information and everything else. And they did it really well. In fact, they did it so well that China's unique independent internet sector has been hugely successful around the world, including in the US. So TikTok beat its US rivals so badly that they all copied TikTok's style. AliExpress was selling twice as many goods as Amazon. And Shein quickly became the world's top fashion seller. Temu was the hottest thing on the net, and so on. A sovereign internet was a huge advantage, it became obvious. By 2023, the Nepalese realised they would be smart to follow China's model rather than making the error made by the Europeans, who let US global tech firms eat their lunches and their economies. The US was horrified. What if other countries started to want the same thing? So articles started to appear saying that, oh, the Nepalese, they've got a really bad idea. So, for example, one appeared on December the 1st, 2023, saying, Nepal has a lot to gain from the open global internet, so why is the country closing the doors on it? From there, Washington DC's soft power version of the CIA, which is the National Endowment for Democracy, went into action. And so, in Nepal last year, US agents circulated reports, organised roundtable discussions and held briefings, all with one message. China is the enemy. The US is your friend. Now, the official theme for this series of events about China was countering corruption and authoritarian influence. At the same time, US operatives organised sessions to train Nepalese reporters, local media, quote, to expose corruption and abuse of authority, publish articles to promote accountability and transparency, and hold political leaders accountable. In other words, hit hard at the government. A third group of operatives spent their time on pulling in young people, or Gen Z youth. Their aim was to empower activists in promoting democratic values and human rights. US operatives provided training on using art for social and political expression. So all in all, the NED by itself spent about $1.6 million stirring up activism in Nepal last year. That's a lot of money in that country. It splashed out to make sure a spotlight was shone on government corruption, on training Gen Z to be politically active, and to encourage people to see the Chinese as the bad guys. I mean, so far so predictable. But what made this particular US operation special was the focus on technology and communications. So the NED in February this year circulated a long and, I would say, unintentionally hilarious report called Data-Centric Authoritarianism, which purported to show how China's development of frontier technologies could globalize repression. In an astonishing feat of logical contortion, this 41-page report argued that if a country wanted to have an internet system that was free and independent of US domination, that country would become a terrible authoritarian place. You see, by this time, Pakistan and Cambodia had joined Nepal in realizing that an independent internet with control within a community's sovereign borders could be a really good idea, especially since the US had a bad reputation for transnational interference. The NED report said Pakistan, Nepal and Cambodia pursuing internet gateways that will funnel all international internet traffic through a government-controlled choke point is a win for China. How can it be a win for China, who's not involved at all? The US report said these moves enhance China's prestige, positioning the once unique Great Firewall as a potential model for other countries worldwide. You know, it's clear that Chinese-style firewalls would be actually good for countries. But if other nations control their own information spaces, commerce spaces, this would crash Washington's all-encompassing grip over the global narrative, over the global everything. Now, Nepal pressed ahead with the tiniest of baby steps. So earlier this year, it simply asked all social media websites to register with the government. The websites had to name a local contact, an authorised person to handle grievances, and a person responsible for self-regulation. Small thing. Now, these details had to be given to Nepal's Ministry of Communications and Information Technology. Deadline September the 3rd. Now, here's where things went odd. TikTok, which has a Chinese parent, was happy to sign up, and so did an app called WeTalk and one called Viber, which I think is from an Israeli company. But the US apps, Facebook, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, and so on, refused to obey. Were they told to do that by Washington? I don't know. The Nepalese government had no choice but to follow through on what it had said by halting them. That's when the Gen Z activists went into action. In the ensuing chaos, lives were lost, property was destroyed, and the cost to Nepal, a poor country, has been enormous, reputationally and financially. It's been tragic. But think about this. The call for protests came from the media sector, the sector trained to publish anti-government articles by the NED. Is that a coincidence? The theme of the protest was to expose corruption and abuse of authority, which is exactly the theme the NED had suggested. But of course that may also just be a coincidence. And the main participants were Gen Z youth, the exact group the NED had been training for political activism. That may also be a coincidence. And allegations are circulated saying the trouble is all China's fault, just as a series of 2024 briefings from the NED had suggested. But let's not forget the root of the problem. The Nepalese wanted an internet system of their own so they could develop their own apps. They could keep out foreign interference and have a measure of internet independence for their own people. This would have been good for the people, especially the creative young Gen Z people in Nepal, who could create their own apps for music, for commerce, for whatever. But now instead they're stuck in the US dominated model, which of course will tell them a Western narrative. West is best, the rest is bad. I can give you an example. Going around people's phones right now in Nepal is a New York Times report titled "The Forces Behind Nepal's Explosive Gen Z Protests." And you know what? It chooses not to mention any of the elements I've just told you about. Not one. Remember, always think for yourself and read widely. Peace.